Okay. Sorry I wasn't there yesterday. Sorry I'm not there again today. And quite honestly, depending on how things go today, will determine whether or not I'm able to be in class tomorrow. So I'm kind of here today. So third hour, you're with Mr. Zolo right now. Fourth hour, you are with Mr. O'Neill right now. And guys, I am probably going to ask you to pause every now and again and help me facilitate some things here. But right now, what you need out, or what I would like you to have out, is the packet that we're doing with the Harding Wilson smiley face cover. And if you would, please flip to, you did the notes yesterday on the history of us, boom. And then on the top there's a section that says Mr. O'Brien /subs. And then if you flip to the next page, there's something there that says background essay. Well, what I want to do, I'll come back to this picture in 1 second, but what I want to accomplish today in class is I want to introduce kind of the activity that's going to take us through the last part of this 1920s, the way that we approach the 1920s. Again, kind of focusing on that question of this facade of normalcy and this idea of normalcy that the Republicans wanted to go back to, and whether or not it was possible to go back to that given all that the country had gone through in terms of the progressive movement and obviously World War I. In fact, Mr. Zolo and or Mr. O'Neill, you'll feel free to pause me at any second to clarify things that I might say here. I'm recording this straight through, not gonna come back and edit it, so it might be a little choppy, it might seem kind of strange, but it is what it is. So here's our objective, right? Today, just kind of looking at introducing the idea of how did the facade of progress conceal the causes of the Depression. And that's really what we're going to dive into, is trying to figure out what caused the Great Depression and how can we attribute blame in a bunch of different areas on things that happened during the 1920s. And the first thing I'm going to tell you is that you had in junior high, you talked about the Depression, and I'm not saying that your junior high teacher was wrong, but my guess is, and if you wanna pause it here to take a poll, or if you just want to kind of confirm this, my guess is that a large emphasis of what you learned in junior high about the Great Depression is that it started with the crash. And while there is some truth that that's a trigger moment, and we can look at what happens after that as being part of the Great Depression, the things that led to that moment in October of 1929 had been building and brewing for some time. And we can make a case with evidence that some of the decisions that are made by government officials and some of the decisions that are made by business during the 1920s, because of what was viewed as progress, but was actually hiding a lot of really foundational problems, economic problems, led to that moment in October of 1929. So I'm going to start with a story, and then we're going to move into the first part of this activity. It's actually a pretty famous Depression-era story. I got to imagine that some of it is kind of become legend, whether or not there's truths or half-truths in it. I think the story holds up. So I wonder how many of you even know what this is a picture of, if you've seen something like this. You know what these guys are doing? They're, the guys sitting up top here are getting their shoes shined by these, it looks like kids sitting down there. And the story goes that, you guys know who John F. Kennedy was. His father, Joseph Kennedy, was the guy who made the money for the family. Some of it legally, some of it maybe not so legally. But he, in the 1920s, had by that time amassed a pretty decent little fortune that he was building through pretty legal means by investing in stocks on the stock market. He had a lot of his wealth invested in businesses so that his wealth could grow. And we'll talk more about that either on Thursday or Friday when I get back. Some of the nuts and bolts as to how that works and kind of how it's going to contribute to part of our problems. But he was sitting in a chair like one of these guys sitting up top, and it was nearing the end of the 1920s, closing in on what we know to be a pretty dramatic economic turning point in our history. And he was sitting there listening to one of the guys actually shining shoes talking about his own stock portfolio and the money that he had invested in the stock market to another shoe shine. And the legend goes, or the story goes, that Joseph P. Kennedy abruptly stood up, paid the guy for shining his shoes, marched right over to his stockbroker. In some versions of the story, he went right to Wall Street, but I find that hard to believe. And he took out all of his money, right? He took all of his money out of the stock market because he's looking at this shoe shine who has this occupation, this job, and this income, and his money is sitting right next to somebody like Joseph P. Kennedy's money, who has, amassed a great fortune, has a lot of wealth. They're both in this same stock market. So if you guys, Mr. O'Neill, Mr. Zolo, if you guys want to pause right now and maybe just talk a little bit about, with that, have these guys talk a little bit about how a shoe shine having their money in the stock market might cause somebody wealthy like Kennedy to have second thoughts about his money being in the stock market. What kind of inherent problems might there be there? What kind of use of the stock market are we looking at? So go ahead and pause and maybe have that conversation for a couple minutes, and hopefully when you pause I don't have too goofy of a face. I'm going to look down. Okay, so hopefully you talked a little bit there, and this isn't just strange my just coming back and talking to you. I'm hoping that some of the things that you talked about have to do with, the purpose of the stock market. Maybe you got to that. The purpose of the stock market is to have a place where businesses can attract the money of the wealthy. If you think back to, here, I'm going to flip to, hopefully this just goes right where, it did not. Let's see. Give me 1 second. Right, if you think back to our model, right? Our models, our economic models, you probably could pull these out right now in your notebooks. You don't necessarily have to, though. But if you think back to our models, especially this one, right, the trickle down, the idea, we could do either of them, but this idea right here, and hopefully you can see my cursor. I was about to point at the screen. This idea of reinvesting, that's we want the money coming out of the wealthy back into businesses and industry, and that's what Kennedy's money is. What we don't see on our model is money coming from down here being invested up there, and that's kind of counter to the point of the stock market. The point of the stock market isn't for people to use it like a casino, where this guy sitting right here is going to invest whatever money he can to try to hit it rich with some company that happens to make it. That's not the spirit of the stock market. The spirit of the stock market is you have somebody who is going to knowingly put their money into a business that they've probably researched, they've done some back work on, and they know that has a good chance of making them a profit on their original investment. So I want to use that as a point to start moving backwards. So we started kind of at the end where we've got the culmination of problems, and you have a glimpse of the problems here with just this image. But what I want to do is I want to do a couple of exercises here. And so the first thing I'd like you to do, if you guys would pass out, please. It's titled the Hook Exercise, Unit 6. I'm going to hold up the camera, but I don't know why. You guys are getting a copy of it right now. So if you would, and you can pause me if you want while you do this, but if you would, go ahead and pass those out. And I think this probably works best if you work with a partner. So just somebody sitting right next to you. What I'd like you to do, I'll read the directions with you, and then I'm going to ask you to pause the video, and then you guys are going to work through it. So the directions are, we're going to be looking at documents probably more into tomorrow. Maybe we'll get them passed out today, hopefully, and you can start looking at one together. But this is called a DBQ, and a DBQ is a document-based question, meaning that we're gonna be investigating our bigger problem with the facade of the 1920s, and what it was hiding and how it ends up being revealed that that there was actually a problem brewing. But we're going to do it looking at a lot of documents. And so this DBQ involves a considerable amount of cause and effect thinking, meaning we have to really think about this happened, therefore this happened. You know, these things don't happen in isolation. And that's the way I think that sometimes the Depression gets taught quite a bit, is that, you know, suddenly, you know, everything's fine, you've got flappers, you've got speakeasies, you've got Al Capone, and then boom, stock market crashes, and now we have a new chapter in U.S. history. Those things don't happen in isolation. There's causes that lead directly to effects. So you have direct, you know, we can make a direct narrative. So there's going to be a lot of cause and effect thinking. And so, you know, countries think about you know, they face these kind of issues a lot. Cause, what's the effect? And so what we're going to do, let's talk about this example that they have here. To solve its debt problem, India decides to print millions of new rupees. This is a cause, right? The cause, what is likely to happen to prices of Indian goods, which would be the effect. Now, we've talked about that. I'm not going to, well, I guess I can, right? Why not? Right? If you think about some of these things that I've done before, right? If we say, you know, this is the money that's being printed, and what is this right here? Mr. Zolo, Mr. O'Neill, I hope they're telling you that this is gold, right? And in this scenario, they're saying India just prints, you know, millions, or what do they print? Millions of new rupees. So why don't you guys, and you can pause this, you guys explain it to Mr. O'Neill and Mr. Zolo. What's the problem with this? And how does it affect the prices of goods? So go ahead, pause. I think this would be a good conversation now. Go ahead and pause that. Assuming you paused it, right? This is, if you just let this play, I kind of look like a goof, I suppose. But then you have this other one that maybe they make a little bit more relevant. Mr. O'Neill will keep. I'm not sure where Mr. Zolo's loyalties lie, but I know that Mr. O'Neill is going to like make a comment about the Chicago Cubs here, and whatever. The Chicago Cubs raised ticket prices by 25%. There's the cause. What effect might this have on attendance? What effect might it have on total revenue? And that one actually gets at the exercise that I want us to go through. So here's what I want you to do. With a partner, read through this next scenario, and then just brainstorm. And you're not going to be right. We're just going to think out loud about this, right? Brainstorm A, B, C, D, and E in terms of effect. So the cause is in the scenario, and then brainstorm the effect. So if you guys would go ahead and pause this and give them, you know, let's take about 5-6 minutes to work through these. Think about them all. All right. I'm pausing too long because hopefully you're pausing. So if you would, and you can kind of stop me as you want to here, guys, but if you would, you know, let's consider new car sales. You know, what kind of things did you think would happen in new car sales? And if you would, Mr. Zolo, Mr. O'Neill, if you guys want to just pause this for a bit here, you know, and as long as it takes, honestly, however long this conversation takes, I'm fine with. Just let me know when you're ready, and you'll let me know by pressing play. So walk through these and try and figure out what's happening to the economy of this country. I want to talk about this last question, or this last point. So country X that we're talking about here, right after you talked about all these other things, so this is just cause and effect thinking, right? This is a decision they made. They decided that the government needs more money, so they're going to raise the income tax to 20%. Well, this is an economic theory that we'll spend some time with later in the semester. So imagine that you have on this graph, right, we have the income of the government. So let's just put a G here, right? This is the amount of money that the government's making, and this over here is the percentage of tax that they have on people. Don't laugh at my writing, I'm doing it with a mouse. So this would follow to logic, right? So the tax percent, if the tax percent is 0, so they're taking 0% of your income, then it would stand to reason, right, that they're making their income off of you is going to be 0. Well, there's this theory that, you know, this obviously, the higher the tax rate, the more money the government's going to be taking in, right? Doesn't that make sense? So the higher the tax rate, the more money the government's going to be taking in. Higher tax rate, more money they're going to be taking in. But now there's this theory, and don't worry about this. It's called the Laffer curve. But what it contends is that there's actually a point, right? There's a peak here, and at that point, the government will actually start to see a decrease until it actually gets all the way down to zero. So if you think about the government, if the government were going to take 100% tax rate, right? So they're going to take all of your money. This theory holds that their income would be zero again. And so this has a lot to do with like the motivation to work, why people would continue to work and work hard beyond a point where they feel like they're no longer working for their own benefit, but they're working for the benefit of the government. But this is, this is cause and effect thinking. And so as we look at as we continue to look at the 1920s, and maybe we even start to get into the documents, although I think we're probably not going to get into the documents till Thursday. So Mr. Azzolo and Mr. O'Neill, I have, the 3 sets of copies, the hook exercise, which we already passed out. We're going to do the second one, the intro reading, next. And so we'll probably hold off on giving out the documents even until Thursday, unless all of this is taking a lot less time than I realize because I'm not actually in the room, in which case you can press on. But here's what I'd like you to do next, is I would like for you to pass out the it's a 2.5 page document. It's called What Caused the Great Depression. And so what I'd like you to do, and you should have highlighters in the room. If you don't, you can borrow one. I think I should have put the box in the room. Hopefully I remember to put the box in the room. For the note sheet though, we don't want to be on Mr. O'Brien and Sub's page anymore. What we want to be on, if you flip with me to the next page, is we want to be on background essay. And now what we're looking for here, okay, what we want to put in here, or what notes we want to take in here, are pieces of evidence that we can find that help us to understand. I'll go back to the objective here, and we have our other question too in the box, right? What were the 1920s, in fact, a return to normalcy? So what was the facade of the 1920s the reality, or or was there, what is it that's behind it that actually makes up the 1920s, and was that a return to normalcy? So today, in focusing on this reading, we're looking at how did this facade of progress conceal the causes of the Depression. So what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to take a few minutes, and I'd like you to closely read this on your own, right? So you're going to read through this on your own, and then you're going to come back, and I'd say you can work with your partner again that you worked through the hook exercise with, and I'd like you to, here's the objective, okay, because this will help us get into notes. What I'd like you to do is I'd like you to take economic notes in the background essay. And what I mean by that is, what are some of the cause and effect scenarios in a theoretical way? So just kind of like they explain how cause and effect can be used to see certain things throughout this introduction. And there's a lot of economic vocabulary. And I'd like you just to take some notes for yourself over in this section on the background reading. And what evidence we're looking for here isn't really going to be answering the question, but it's going to give us the skill set to be able to use the documents to start answering the question. So what the notes we're taking here are going to be kind of general, kind of based on what are the things that we need to be thinking about big picture as we look at the 1920s from an economic perspective. So hopefully that makes sense. If Mr. Zola or Mr. O'Neill, if you need to clarify that, and if you can clarify that, please feel free. But go ahead and pause me and take some time, one close read by yourself, revisit with a partner, taking some notes on that top section specifically to the ideas that we see in terms of economics, right? Economics and big picture cause and effect when it comes to economics. So go ahead and do that. You can pause me on that now. Okay, so I'm assuming that you went through that last activity. No idea how much time is left in class, but I'd like to do a little bit of closure on where we're at right now. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to go back to this to just do a little clarifying of cause and effect thinking. And I'm going to use a couple of things from the introduction reading to talk about this. So let's look at, it would be the second page of the introduction reading. And if you would, on the right-hand column, there's a paragraph that starts with an investor. And I want to go down to the last part of that. We see purchases. All right, purchasers look in the financial pages of the newspaper, see that Radio Corporation has gone up $9 in last week, and buy shares, not even knowing if the company is actually making a profit. Okay, and the word I want to get to is this is called speculation. And of course, the reading points you directly to this can be dangerous. If you didn't have speculation in that top note section, I think you should put the word speculation over there, because speculation could be one of the guys sitting in the top, right? We might have Kennedy, right? This might be Kennedy here. I didn't mean to draw on you. But then we could have this other guy who has some money, but he's not doing his due diligence. He's not doing his background work, and he's not doing his homework on stocks. And so he's just kind of following the ebb and flow, and he's not necessarily investing for the right reasons. And we're going to talk, I promise you, we're going to talk even more what that means, investing for the right reasons. So if we look at that idea of speculation, that idea of speculation is going to get us into a look at the documents, and I think we're going to hold off on starting those tomorrow.